Global Insight News.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. This is where we take sources you send us and, well, we dive deep to pull out the key takeaways for you.
Exactly. Saves you the trouble.
So today we're looking at something pretty major, the election of Pope Leo XIV. He was born Robert Prevost.
And the big headline here is that he's the first U.S.-born pope ever in, 2,000 years of church history?
Yeah, it's huge. Our source for this is a really detailed explainer from Sky News.
Right.
And our goal really is just to walk you through who he is, this journey he's had, what people are saying about it initially, so you get the picture without wading through everything yourself.
Makes sense. Because, look, a U.S. pope, that immediately brings up a ton of questions, doesn't it? Who is this guy? What could this mean?
Totally. Okay, so let's maybe start at the beginning. His roots.
A place to start.
Robert Francis Prevost. The article says he's from Chicago originally, grew up in Dolton, Illinois, described as a working-class area. But what really jumps out is how early his callings seem to appear.
Yeah, I saw that, like kindergarten or first grade.
Exactly. Instead of playing, cops and robbers or whatever, he was playing priest.
It's quite something for a kid that age. And the article mentions he knew prayers in Latin and English really young.
Yeah, apparently had a remarkable grasp. It paints a picture of a really focused kid.
It really does.
Yeah.
Makes you wonder what was going on in the family, the community, to foster that so early.
Well, the family stories are great. His brother Louis apparently called it mind-blowing. So they used to tease him when he was like 6 years old about becoming pope.
No way.
Swear down. And get this, apparently a saber on their street actually predicted back then he'd be the first U.S. pope.
Okay, that's almost like prophecy or something. It's spooky.
It adds this whole other layer to the story.
But he didn't stay in Illinois. His path took him pretty far afield for a long time. Peru, right?
Yeah, his missionary work in Peru seems absolutely central. A really formative time, it sounds like.
How so? What did the article say about that?
Well, he spent many years there. He's remembered, apparently, as saintly missionary.
Saintly, okay.
And there's this anecdote from 2022, him wading through mud to help people after floods. It just shows this real, hands-on commitment.
Yeah, that kind of image sticks with you. And it wasn't just a short stint, was it?
No, not at all. He actually got Peruvian citizenship in 2015.
Wow, okay.
And served there as an administrator and then later Archbishop of Chiclayo.
So deeply integrated into Peruvian life, not just visiting.
Exactly. And this is where it gets really interesting geopolitically, I suppose.
What do you mean?
The article suggests that this time in Peru, this deep Latin American experience actually helped make him a more palatable candidate for pope, a more universal one.
Ah, right. Because there's maybe been a bit of a hesitation about a U.S. pope, given U.S. power and influence.
That seems to be the idea, his time away, his connection to Peru, maybe lessen concerns about him being too tied to, U.S. interests. What do you think of that?
I think that's a really plausible reading. It suggests the cardinals were maybe looking for someone with that broader global perspective, not just someone purely from a superpower nation. It speaks to the internal politics of the church, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So, okay, we have this guy who, according to his brother John, only ever wanted to be a missionary.
Right, the reluctant pope idea.
Yeah. So how did he actually climb the ladder? What were the key steps?
Well, first step, ordained a priest in the Augustinian order. That's his religious community.
Okay, the Augustinians.
Yeah, they're a pretty significant order.
Yeah.
Known for community, intellectual stuff. And the article notes he was elected twice to senior roles within the order itself.
So leadership potential recognized early on within his own community.
Seems like it. And then fast forward to 2023, big appointment from Pope Francis, head of the dicastery for bishops.
Right. For listeners maybe not super familiar with the Vatican setup, can you explain why that role is so important?
Sure. Basically, that department, the dicastery for bishops, is responsible for finding and recommending priests to become bishops all over the world.
Okay, so major influence on who leads the church locally.
Huge influence, yeah. And the article points out something else significant he did in that role. He added 3 women to the group that actually votes on those bishop nominations.
Oh, wow. Okay, that's a notable move. Progressive.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And then also in 2023, Pope Francis made him a cardinal.
So quite a rapid rise in those last couple of years before the papacy.
Very much so.
And yet his brother John insists he never wanted any of it. Bishop, cardinal, pope. just missionary work.
Mm,
And John thinks that reluctance actually makes him a better leader, gives him confidence. It's an interesting take on his character, isn't it?
it really is.
Yeah.
Suggests maybe less personal ambition, more sense of duty, perhaps.
Yeah.
Which brings us to, well, what does he actually stand for? What are his known positions?
Yeah, crucial question. The article gives us some pointers. It says he's seen as pretty close to Pope Francis's vision on things like the environment, outreach to the poor, migrants, key Franciscan themes.
Right.
And there's a quote from him from 2024. The bishop is not supposed to be a little prince sitting in his kingdom.
That's quite direct. Suggests a more down-to-earth, service-focused style.
Seems like it. Away from that sort of detached, hierarchical model, maybe.
And the article also mentions he supported Pope Francis on allowing divorced and remarried Catholics to receive communion. That was a big controversial reform under Francis.
Yeah, it was. But on another sensitive issue blessing same-sex couples, his support is described as more mild.
Ah, interesting. So maybe not lockstep with Francis on everything.
Yeah.
Or perhaps just a more cautious approach there.
Could be. Nuance is important, like you say.
Definitely. The article also flags some of his past comments on U.S. politics,
Mm-hmm.
critical of the Trump administration's policies, especially on migration.
Right. He shared a post about the suffering of suspected gang members being deported, I think.
Yeah. And apparently he was also critical of Vice President J.D. Vance's views. Shared posts arguing against Vance's interpretation of Christian teachings regarding mass deportations.
And the quote cited was pretty blunt. J.D. Vance is wrong. Jesus doesn't ask us to rank our love for others.
Wow. So not afraid to speak out on political matters when he sees a clash with his values.
Seems that way. And his brother John's prediction. He expects him to be a second Pope Francis, but politically moderate.
Not real far left, and he's not going to be real far right, kind of right down the middle. That was the quote, right?
That's the one. Seems to fit with the picture painted so far.
But like you said, with any leader who's been in positions of power.
Yeah. There are usually complexities, controversies.
And the article does address some very serious ones here. Allegations about how he handled clergy sex abuse cases, both in Chicago and Peru.
This is obviously incredibly sensitive and, well, critical.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And SNAP, the survivors network of those abused by priests, they've voiced real concerns about his election because of these past issues. They want accountability.
The article mentions a specific complaint filed with the Vatican in 2023. It involved survivors, Prevost, and others. It followed a big settlement, $2 million, by the Augustinians in Chicago over rape accusations.
Right, and the allegation was that the accused priest's name was kept off a public list.
Yeah. And SNAP's message to him, now he's Pope, is pretty stark. You can end the abuse crisis, the only question is, will you?
Powerful stuff. It really puts the pressure on.
It does. Now, to be fair, the article also includes a statement Prevost made back in 2023 to Vatican News.
What did he say?
He apparently emphasized the need for transparency and honesty when dealing with abuse allegations.
Okay, so you have the survivor's concerns and demands, and then you have his stated commitment to transparency. A real tension there.
Definitely. His actions on this front will be watched incredibly closely, you'd have to assume.
Without a doubt. It's a defining issue for the church.
So, shifting gears slightly, back to the election itself. Thursday, May 8th, 2025, that's when it happened, according to the article. History made. First U.S. Pope.
And his brother Louis's reaction, still mind-blowing, presumably.
Still mind-blowing, yeah. Given the childhood jokes, you can imagine.
And interestingly, the article suggests he was seen as a compromise candidate going into the conclave.
What does that usually imply?
Often it means there wasn't one obvious frontrunner, maybe different factions couldn't quite agree, and he emerged as someone acceptable to a broader range of cardinals.
Okay. Makes sense. And then, of course, that iconic image, him appearing on the balcony at St. Peter's.
A moment for the history books, for sure.
And just to round things out, the article adds a little personal color. Apparently, he enjoys Wordle.
Huh. Even popes need their daily word puzzle fix.
And he's a Chicago White Sox fan.
Oh, Sox fan. Adds a bit of humanity, doesn't it?
Shows us, well, a really complex figure.
Definitely. You've got this journey from a Chicago kid with this incredibly strong early sense of vocation through years of really dedicated missionary work in Peru, then climbing through church leadership roles.
And ending up as the first American pope. It's quite a story arc.
It really is, and full of these interesting tensions, these contrasts.
Yeah.
Well, like you mentioned, that lifelong dedication to being a priest, but apparently real reluctance to take on the top jobs.
Yeah, and being deeply American from the U.S. Midwest, but having such formative long-term experience in Latin America.
Exactly. And then, having these progressive stances on some issues, aligning with Francis, but also facing these very serious criticisms about handling abuse cases in the past.
It's not a simple picture at all.
Not simple at all. And it's this complexity, I think, that makes his papacy potentially so significant, maybe even transformative.
Which kind of leads us to a final thought for you, the listener.
Given everything we've just discussed, this unique background, the blend of U.S. roots and Latin American experience, the progressive leanings alongside the controversies, what kind of impact do you think a U.S.-born pope, this particular U.S.-born pope, might actually have on the Church's future, its relationship with the wider world?
Yeah, what parts of his history, his stated views, the criticisms, what will end up being most influential as he starts this, well, immense job?
It's certainly a lot to think about as his papacy begins.